premiere episode of Mohawk Meets the Masters of Media. It's a show where top international professionals discuss the industry with its future players, the students of Mohawk College. I'm Atul Rao, Professor of Media and Entertainment here at Mohawk. Let me introduce you to our co-host and one of our top students here at Mohawk, Ms. Ida Adamovich. For our very first episode, we have the most amazing guest, Hollywood actor, producer, writer, and author, Mr. Dave Thomas. All right, let's get him online right now.
I don't know what to say.
Wow, you're early. This is great. All right, so you once told me years ago that the entertainment business is a game of endurance. Have you seen this play out in a lot of careers from your point of view?
Yeah, and keep in mind the things that I told you a year ago or 10 years ago or whenever that was. Maybe I don't believe that anymore, you know?
Right.
I mean, I modify some of the things I say as life beats me up. I think that the road to success is a game of endurance, that's for sure.
Okay.
I don't know that entertainment specifically is a game of endurance, you know? My son was lamenting the other day because he's a recording engineer, and he said, you know, the work is not consistent. You don't work every day. And excuse me, he was complaining about this, and I said, he was talking about some of his friends who had graduated, got a bachelor's degree, and were working for an insurance company, and I said, what? You envy a guy that works for an insurance company? That guy won't have a job in 20 years. Just forget it, you know? The way the world's technology and economy is changing, and those kind of employee-type jobs are, I think, way more at risk than jobs in entertainment.
Interesting. So you're saying really that your greatest asset in the marketplace is you, more than any company, more than any plan.
Absolutely. You know, Bernie Brillstein, who is a very famous manager, managed a lot of people, Lorne Michaels, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and he was my manager for a while. He said to me, never be loyal to a logo. And what he meant by that was he meant build your own logo. Don't be an employee of Exxon, or don't be an employee of, you know, even Apple. You know, build your own logo, you know.
And you've certainly done that repeatedly with Maple Palm and with Animax Interactive now. And your entire career, it seems to be characterized by diversity and versatility. And how much do you think is this a factor now in the future for, say, Mohawk students to be? Because, I mean, you've had many, not only do you play a zillion characters, but you also play the roles of producer, writer, director, actor. Is that something that students should be nurturing all these skills?
I don't know. I don't want to tell anyone what to do with their career. There are a lot of people who only direct, and they're very successful at that. And same thing with acting. And you know, my agents and managers told me many times, just do one thing and do one thing well, so people will know you for that. Well, I didn't want to do that. That to me was boring, you know? So sometimes I'd act, sometimes I'd direct, sometimes I'd produce, you know. I put my own money on the line to do shows. I've lost money, I've made money. You know, it's like, I never thought the money that I made in entertainment, I always thought of it kind of like Monopoly money. It was like fake, you know? You could command big salaries when you're hot, and that money didn't mean anything. And then when you don't have it and you're not making it, it also doesn't mean anything. You just gotta figure out I'm gone way off topic here.
Oh,
What the hell was the question?
Oh,
Go back to the beginning.
all
You
right.
gotta,
It was all about versatility and flexibility in your career choices.
yeah. Well, I think you got to do what your heart directs you to do, and each case is going to be individual, you know. And if you find yourself interested in something, don't shy away from it because it's in a different department. Go for it, try it. Because I've been where you're sitting, and you're thinking, how do I get into this business? How do I get that first break? How do I get that shot? You know, that is the hardest part of your career. What you're facing now is the hardest part of your career. And what it requires is almost a Viking assault on the business. You can't take no for an answer. You got to wake up every day and raid them again. You know, you cannot stop. You cannot give up. And when one door opens, you can't relax just because that door opened. You got to keep pushing through to get to the next door. You know, you're at the stage in your career where your frustrations are at their highest, where what you want to do is not tested yet. You haven't had an opportunity to strut your stuff and show people what you can do. And you're dying to do that. And you want to know who's going to give me that shot. I was working on a master's degree in English Lit because I didn't know what else to do. And I didn't want to be a teacher, and I didn't want to get a master's degree in English Lit. But I got a scholarship, and they were paying me to teach first-year tutorials, so I did it because of that. I did it for the money. And while I was doing that, I realized that I can't do this. And so I sat down and I wrote 5 comedy scripts, and I drove into Toronto, and I went to every place, every television studio, every place at the CBC. And then I ran out of TV places to go, and I went to radio places, and I ended up selling 5 of the 8 scripts I wrote to some obscure guy in radio named Jack Humphreys, who was producing kind of a radio variety show for the CBC. So, but I left that day. He paid me $75 for each script. I left that day with that money thinking, all right, I'm in business, you know? And that wasn't it. I mean, you know, then I had to keep assaulting that same place every week, every day to try and get the next job, you know? And then if you relentlessly assault this, you will get what you want. You won't have time to appreciate it till you're in, you know?
Right.
And then you'll kind of look back and you'll go, wow, I did all that. I was so busy trying to get my next job, I didn't take the time to look over my shoulder, you know, and think about it.
And you were working with your brother Ian.
Yeah, he was Ian had a stint as a CBC radio producer for a while, and he was producing a show called the National Rock Works, and they needed some comedy sketches. So Eugene Levy and myself and a guy named Don Dickinson wrote these comedy sketches, and they were, you know, 2 or 3 minutes long, and were kind of interspersed in a 2-hour show, you know. So it wasn't just about the comedy. There were interviews with musical guests and poets and authors of books, and then a sketch, you know. So, but it was on every week, and we had to do those. And then while I was in Toronto writing those, I got into the cast of Godspell, which was completely different than writing sketches for CBC, but, you know, it was a show, and I really didn't want to, that was not my goal, was to go to Broadway and do, you know, musical comedy for the rest of my life, but it was a show, and it looked like fun, and there was, you know, Paul Schaefer was the musical director, and, you know, Andrea Martin was in the show, and
Wow.
Gilda Radner, and people who I knew were funny, Marty Short. So I did it. And course I did. I auditioned and got in, and then I was in that till it closed.
Now, actually, you are the master of the writer's room in a sense, because your 14 Emmy nominations and wins, a couple of wins from SCTV. It's not done as much as it should be in Canada. I mean, I think it's something that you really got going and made it work. What suggestions, what are some of the tricks of making a functioning writer's room? What kind of rules do you have for collaboration? Who calls the shots and when? What would you suggest?
Well, I started doing this after SCTV because I was the head writer on SCTV after Harold Ramis left. So I just liked working with other writers. I didn't like writing comedy alone because that bored me. It was like, what am I going to do? Make myself laugh?
Yeah.
So I liked having somebody or some people across the table to bounce around, and I still do. And I'm still writing. And so after SCTV, I would sell a show idea, and then I would put some writers together, and then I did that repeatedly. Then I ended up hiring some of these guys that were in that Harvard Lampoon chain that went. Typically, they'd go Harvard Lampoon, either Letterman or SNL or The Simpsons, and that's been going on for 25 years anyway. And I hired some of those guys and gave them their first job. Josh Weinstein and Bill Oakley, who produced The Simpsons for 5 or 6 years. I gave them their first job. Dave Cohan and Max Muchnick, who created Will and Grace, their first job. There's about a dozen writers that I gave them their first job that became big, successful hotshots,
Mike Myers worked for you at one point, didn't he?
Yeah, he worked on the Dave Thomas show when I was doing that for CBS. But that was a short stint, and I knew he was I knew he was on his way to do his own thing. He was a performer writer more than a writer. There is a difference.
Do you find that is the Canadian industry still as supportive of doing projects? For example, Bob and Doug was sort of U.S.-Canadian sort of an effort. Do you find the Canadian government still having that kind of support and a good route for us?
The animated Mackenzie show that we did for Global, the writer's room in that was a fun room. And that show got totally screwed. As the first animation company we hired went bankrupt, and we lost 2 whole shows at the very beginning and had to just come up with money from that cost me money on that one. And then Global, CanWest Broadcasting, went into bankruptcy protection during the middle of the shoot, and the bank froze our loan. And so, but we kept writing and kept cranking them out. And the writers in that were fun. They were fun to work with.
I think some of the students have got some questions set up. I'd like to introduce you to, first of all, one of our top students, Ms. Ida Adamovich. She's going to field questions from the audience.
All right, Ida.
Oh, hello. Okay, so first question is from second-year television student Melissa O'Brien. And she wrote, as an aspiring writer, is there any pointers you can give us? So what separates a good writer from an exceptional writer?
Obviously, what separates a good writer from an exceptional writer is whether they sell their stuff or not, I guess. I mean, I don't want to draw the line in the sand that writing is defined by your ability to sell, but there is a point at which you've written 25 screenplays and they're all stacked up being used as a door jamb to keep the door open, that you'd have to question, all right, what am I doing wrong? I think that you have to write every day if you're a writer. I think that you would write even if you didn't get paid for it, if you're a real writer. And one of the things a lot of writers don't do enough, especially in television and film, is they don't understand the value of rewriting.
From Lars, second-year television student, what is the #1 quality that enabled you to be so versatile in so many roles? Actor, producer, director, writer, and then further on that, how are you able to switch roles while working on the same production?
Well, actually, I've written things that and directed things that I've acted in, and I think that I did a really shitty job acting in them. So I think there's a tendency these days, especially in my generation, of looking at Woody Allen, a guy who was a writer, director, producer, and going, well, yeah, I'd like to do that. Just because you would like to do it doesn't mean you can do it, you know? But I have to be completely honest. I don't think I ever did a really good job of performing in things that I was directing, because I always paid attention to the other people, and I never paid attention to myself, and I should have. Because then later when I saw it in editing, I realized, well, I suck, and they're all good, and that really pissed me off.
What about just ensuring your quality while switching different positions? So like just writing on a show and then acting in a different show?
You know, I think that happens primarily because I'm a disturbed person. So I don't really focus well. So I focus at a task well, specifically, but I have a real hard time saying, okay, I'm going to just write now for a long period, because then I'll get distracted by something and I'll go, oh, look at that, you know. I don't think it's a skill or a talent. I think it just happened that I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that. And, you know, I have this theory that being funny isn't really a talent. It's kind of a disorder. Most of the people who I know who are funny are really screwed up in some way or other. And I think that I definitely fill that bill. And the fact that I've done these different things is not a testament to my great talent, but more of a testament to my condition.
Okay, so going on to third-year television student Rob, he's asked, how was it working on Arrested Development?
Well, they asked me if I was interested in going on that show and playing Charlize Theron's uncle. And I thought, well, how bad could that be? And I mean, she's drop-dead gorgeous. And so I knew the guys that were doing that show. Jimmy Valley is a friend of mine, and so is Mitch. And but I'd never really thought of being on their show. And honestly, to be completely candid, when I did those shows, I hadn't ever even seen the show. So, but it was a lot of fun, and I thought she was an amazing actress. And I can tell you one story. We had one scene that they threw at us one night at about 10 o'clock. I was in a trailer, and got a knock on the door, and this PA hands me some pages. He said, yeah, we're going to shoot this. It was like a 3-page scene. And I'm looking at it. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I go, God. So I thought, well, I'm gonna learn these lines. I'm gonna know this cold. And it was just me and Charlize, and I thought, this is odd, because typically in a television show, if you're not in a scene with one of the regulars in the cast, that is one of the recurring regular cast members, that scene is probably cannon fodder for editing, because the show serves the recurring cast more than it serves guest stars. That's just the way it goes. So I looked at this scene, it was just me and Charlize, and I thought, well, this is going to get cut. This is a waste of time. Why are they making us do this? So I learned it. And I thought, I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to actually blow Charlize right out of her chair. So, pretty cocky. And I learned it. We went to the set, and I threw away the run-through. You know, we did a camera blocking run-through, and I just kept, threw away the line. And then when it came to the first, when they rolled camera, I came at her really hard, as hard as I could, with as much energy as I could, and I delivered my lines really fast. And she came back just as hard or harder, and it really, really amazed me. I was not expecting that, you know. And then Jimmy Valley and Mitch run down from the writer's room. They were watching it on the feed. And they run down from the writer's room. This is great. We didn't think this would turn out this good. Here, we're going to give you some notes. And so they gave us some notes, and we did it again. And I was like hammering her and just coming at her as hard as I could. And then I started improvising. There was a thing about locking the door, and I was like making up different types of locks that I would do at the door. And she went with every beat that I did and improvised just as fast as I could throw anything at her. And then afterwards, she looks at me and she goes, "That was fun."
Wow.
So she's pretty great, you know.
That's awesome.
So from Norbert for first year, integrated animation, with regards to comedy, it can be a hit and miss in how you develop your routine. Do you use it by bouncing ideas around? Do you believe you base much on real life that people can identify with situationally?
Especially when you're a young writer, basing things on real life is good, because you haven't experienced enough yet to be able to just draw on things. I think you want to be able to springboard and use your imagination and do other stuff. But I think if you base things on real life, then you are more likely to be writing something that's relatable.
I have a quick question for the audience, actually. How many people here love Popzilla?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm meeting with the executive at MTV that launched that today.
Oh, cool.
After this. And so I'll tell them what happened. I'll tell them the show of hands. And we liked that show. But what happened with that show was when MTV bought it, they had no place for it on their schedule. And it was really weird. At that particular time, they were buying a lot of stuff just to buy it, to take it off the market, so they had it and they had the option to run it. When it came time to program it, there were certain things in that show that were time sensitive. They were kind of topical. They were, jokes about things that had happened in pop culture. And so there was a shelf life for the show where they had to get it on the air. And this executive tried to get it on the air and got it in on a really shitty time slot. And then it didn't do well in its first rating. And then the MTV executives moved it to like 1 o'clock in the morning, and it just got screwed. So we did, I think, 12 of them, and then it died after that. And I thought it was, we had a lot of fun with that show because they wanted to turn that show around fast. They wanted an animation show that could be done weekly. You can't do most animation in a week. You can't do a 22-minute show in a week. So I went into the designers here at Animax and the background people, and I said, look, I want to be able to design this show so that it can be turned around fast. So I want to do altered JPEGs for the celebrity faces with the kind of lantern jaw movement for lip-syncing dialogue. And nondescript round faces for anyone who isn't a celebrity, so that the celebrities were the only ones worthy of getting a JPEG. And then the backgrounds would be JPEGs that were kind of altered too. So that was, and I said, and I want you to show me how fast you can do these. Because if you're spending 3 hours tweaking the grass on the lawn in front of a building, you're wasting time, and we can't do the show that way. So that show was designed specifically to be turned around fast. And I liked the style of the art in it. I thought it was kind of interesting, and it came out looking kind of unique and different. And I wish the show could have lasted longer, but it didn't. And I'll ask the executive about that at lunch today, what the hell his problem was.
So what advice could you give an inspiring students that want to do what you do for a living?
I said this earlier. It's an assault. It's like Viking raids. You can't just give up because you get a door slammed in your face. You have to find some kind of a way to make that propel you further. And you're going to get doors slammed in your face. I'm getting doors slammed in my face every day still. And, you know, it's like, it's just the nature of the business. So I guess what I would say is don't give up. Start now. Start going around banging on doors now. Write something. If you want to be a writer, write something. Get a sample that you can take with you when you bang on doors. If you want to be a director, shoot something and take it with you when you bang on doors. You have to figure one thing, and that is content providers, writers, and the technical people who help the writers get their work up and going, the directors, the sound engineers, the people who do sound design, the people who mix, the people who edit. These people are always going to have jobs, and the content creators are always going to have jobs, and the actors and actresses are always going to have jobs, because these are the things that the companies can't formatize, you know? This is an odd business. In normal businesses, you make one shoe, you make a mold for that shoe, and then you make 1 million of them. In this business, each movie is a different mold. Each television show is a different mold. Each episode of each television is a different mold. So this is what drives the studios and the television networks crazy, because they can't formatize any of that. They've got all this stuff, the variables of the artist that they've got to deal with. And that's you guys. And that's your power here. You're the people that have the ideas. And the ideas are the things that propel the content forward. So as long as you've got ideas, you've got a job. And you just got to get out there and get your idea out there. That's all. So-called supportive Canadian talent. Mm-hmm. Basically, they make money by rebroadcasting American television shows and selling the ad time for higher money than they could sell their own local programming. They don't really have a real interest in developing Canadian programming. They'll say they do. They're mandated by the CRTC to do that, but they don't really. And, you know, as somebody who's actually been in the trenches and dealing with these companies, I don't know. It's tough. It's hard to sell them anything. It's hard to get them to promote anything. You know, I mean, you can get a show produced, but then what you have to realize is you're competing in Canada for an audience the same way that you compete in the United States. And you're competing with American product for that same Canadian audience. So, you know, if they don't know about it, if there's been no advertising to tell people that it's going to be on, then how are you supposed to get any ratings, and how are you supposed to measure it in television as successful enough to be repeated? So I don't know, man. I think it's difficult for a government to mandate that entertainment should be specifically Canadian. That was the joke of the Mackenzie brothers. That, you know, we said, well, what do you want? Like a couple of hosers there, you know, wearing parkas and toques and frying back bacon, drinking beer, and maybe a Mountie. And that is. So, you know, it was one of the greatest ironies of my career that became successful, because we did it as a mean-spirited insult to the CBC. They're ridiculous. And, but, you know, when Dan Aykroyd was debating, you're going to hate me for saying this, but when Dan Aykroyd was debating whether or not to do Saturday Night Live, John Belushi said to him, Dan, come to Rome. And what he meant by that was shooting in New York. He meant, you're in Canada, you're in Toronto, you're in the provinces. If you use the movie Gladiator as a metaphor, you're in Spain in some small Colosseum, you know. But if you want to be in entertainment, sooner or later you're going to have to come to the Colosseum in Rome. You're going to have to come to Hollywood, or you're going to have to come to New York. And so that's something that you all will face, because you're in Toronto. You're not in Hollywood. You're not in New York. Yes, you can have a successful career in Canada. I do not want to belittle that. But if you've got those kind of aspirations that you really want to give it a shot and you really want to give it a go and you're going to have to come here at some point. And that's a whole other kettle of fish, because you can be the biggest star in Canada. You come down here and nobody's heard of you. You got to start all over. And it's a very humbling, but I think it's good. I think it reminded me when I came down here that I wasn't such hot shit and that I had to prove myself and start again, But so I am skeptical. If you can get a job, if you can sell them a show, if you can do a Men with Brooms or a Canadian movie and get it to work, great. That's great. But it's hard to get those things because, they're not really programming an entire day's schedule of Canadian programming. They got 1 or 2 slots that are Canadian, and all the rest are rebroadcast of American stuff. So I think in many ways it's harder to get a job in Canada than it is to get a job here.
Yeah, unless you work for Corner Gas.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of buzz now about micro-budget movies. Is that something that you think there's a legitimate market for that for people coming up now?
Well, there's always a market for cheap shit that scares people, When you look at Blair Witch, it wasn't so much that it was a good movie. It was that they made it for $20,000 or something like that, that's what, there's always going to be that kind of talk. But I do think that there's an insane disparity now in the business. It's sort of like the parallel of the culture where, the middle class is disappearing and there's like more poor in America and more really rich. There's more really big movies that cost over $150 million. And then some cheap movies that cost less than $1 million and very little in the middle now. The middle used to be an area that I worked a lot. I could get movies in that middle area, and that's gone now. It's just gone. That's why you got to hone your skills. You got to develop your ideas. If you're on the technical side, doing directing, editing, sound, things like that, hone your skills so you become the very best at what you do.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, what do you feel is your biggest accomplishment and why?
Oh, God.
I know. A little bit.
That's a hard one.
I don't know. I don't really think I had a big accomplishment,
Well, what show or movie did you have most fun working on? What was you just really enjoyed going there?
That's an easier one to answer. The sucky answer to your first question is, well, my family, They're my biggest accomplishment. People go, oh, that's so sweet. Oh. So I'm not going to bore you with that shit. But I love my family, but I'm not going to. I had a lot of fun on this really stupid, cheap comedy I did in Canada called White Coats. It was a complete disaster. It was falling apart from the seams from the minute I got into it. I think it was called the Intern Academy in Canada. The geniuses at the French distributors said that they wanted to use the word academy. They would rather name it after a expended franchise police academy, which there were 6 of or 7 of. They would rather use that name than the name I wanted to use. But anyway, we took over a hospital. It was a cast and crew that worked and basically lived in this hospital every day, and it was a riot from beginning to end. And we used to have parties on Friday nights after we wrapped. And this was in Edmonton. And the parties got so famous that people from town were coming to our cast parties, our crew parties, in cars and trying to get into the hospital. We had to get security, to control it. But we had a lot of fun doing that. SCTV, of course, was a lot of fun, but it was also ridiculous hard work,
I had one more question, actually. Just thinking
Yeah.
about your network meeting. You once mentioned that in Hollywood, there's always people who claim to be the bottom line, the top dog, and then somebody else walks in who's bigger than them. Is that still the case over there?
I actually witnessed that, and I think I was telling you the story. At the very beginning of my career, I did a couple of projects with Joel Silver, who, if you look him up, he's like, you know, Lethal Weapon producer. He's a big Hollywood producer now. But he was working for a guy named Larry Gordon at the time. And we were sitting in Joel's office. I think it was Rick Moranis and myself. And we were like, Joel was saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take over Hollywood. And I'm going to do the studio executives. They're going to do this and they're going to make that. And anyway, to make a long story short, Larry Gordon walks in the middle of Joel's speech, and Joel just bows his head kind of humbly. And Larry starts talking about how he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And he's going to make the studio do this. And then a studio executive came in to have a meeting with him, and Larry's head hump. And then I realized that that's the way it works here. Everybody's a big hotshot in the room till the guy above them in the food chain walks in, and then their head lowers respectfully, and it, starts again with the other guy,
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that story.
Anyway.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough, Dave. This has been truly inspirational. Let's hear from you. How are you guys feeling? Yeah.
Said this, but just one last thing before I go. If you're really passionate about this and you want to do it, do it. Don't give up. Slam at it every day and don't give up. You will do it. This is a business where your dreams can actually come true. And the only person who can make them come true is you. So get out there and give it all you got.